Hey guys, so Fox and Friends weekend co-host Will Cain had a few things to say about Simone Biles last week. And now I have a few things to say about Fox and Friends weekend co-host Will Cain. So Will Cain was on a podcast that I don't personally listen to, but check out what he said about Simone Biles.
The bottom line is we are celebrating quitting, and that's where we've gotten as a culture and as a nation. Now, first of all, I do think Simone Biles deserves her own individual criticism.
Now, he went on to say more. Here's the essence of it. He says, mental health is a real thing. Okay, thank you, Will Cain, for that. But he says, we have to focus on mental health. But it's also become this total get out of jail free card. Like, he says, if you invoke mental health, no matter what decision or behavior you then initiate, no one can question it. Look, if you don't live with mental illness as I do, or you don't love someone who does, it may be hard to really explain to you just how infuriating comments like this are. But I want you to check this out. Recently, the New York Times reported on the dramatic rise in children needing urgent mental health care. Now, this is a problem that has been getting worse for years, but it really became serious during the pandemic. The New York Times story opens with an 11-year-old calling a suicide hotline. One doctor in the story said they treated an 8-year-old child who attempted suicide. And one hospital, a children's hospital in Virginia, has seen a 300% increase in mental health emergency visits for kids between the ages of 2 and 12. Now, are all these kids quitters? Are they all trying to get a get out of jail free card? Of course, Will Cain would never say that about an 8-year-old child because even he would realize that to do so would make him sound like an ass. But what do his words actually tell people with mental illness? What do his words tell those kids in mental health crisis? Remember, he said Simone Biles was deserving of individual criticism. What an odd phrase, individual criticism. And she deserved it, Will Cain says, because she decided she needed to step away from gymnastics to take care of her mental health, to put herself first. So what Will Cain is telling me, those kids in crisis, and anyone else who has experienced mental illness is that, okay, we acknowledge that mental illness is real, but it's not the same as physical illness. That's why you didn't see Will Cain call out and subject Bob Odenkirk to individual criticism for stepping away from the set of Better Call Saul so that he could be hospitalized after having a heart attack. Because nobody does that. When you put yourself first to get treated for a physical illness, no one ever questions it, and no one ever criticizes you. But Simone Biles, well, Will Cain was not going to let that go without his having a say. And that is why we have a disparity in this country between physical health and mental health. Here in my home state of Connecticut, Medicaid will reimburse $2,665 a day for a pediatric inpatient admission. However, a kid admitted to a psychiatric bed, that will be reimbursed just $1,000 a day. They're both beds, they just don't have the same value. And that's if you can even get a bed. Because a child in a mental health crisis who shows up in the emergency room for treatment can wait up to a month to get a bed. Now, what does that tell that child about how we value mental illness? What does that tell that child's family about where we put our priorities and what we think of people who need treatment for mental illness? Well, let's go back to Will Cain's words. He says, if you invoke mental health, no matter what decision or behavior you then initiate, well, he's got a right to judge you. And that's why there is so much shame that underlies everything in this country when we talk about mental illness. It's shame that leads people to decide not to get treatment, to try and man up or gut it out or play through the pain. You know, these are not things that anyone ever tells someone when they have a broken bone or have a heart attack. What you get told when that happens is, my God, you've got to get to the emergency room. In fact, I will drive you there. But let's go back now to one other thing that Will Cain said. He said, get out of jail free. That is not an accidental reference. It is a very specific choice of words. And it gets to something very old and very damaging. The idea that people with mental illness are somehow different from the rest of us, that they are somehow unpredictable, dangerous, that they are deserving of the illness that they have, that they did something to deserve it, that they should be shamed for it. The idea is that, in a way, people with mental illness need to be punished for it. And that gets back to the idea not that long ago when people with mental illness were literally locked away in chains. That's why we see language like committed suicide, which takes an act of profound desperation and turns it into a crime. There is tons of research that shows people in the media who use this kind of language, well, they help to perpetuate the stereotypes and the stigma that keeps people from talking about mental illness, that keeps people from seeking treatment for mental illness. Treatment, by the way, that is very, very available, that people don't have to suffer. They can get better, but many choose not to because they do not want to be subjected to individual criticism. One research paper that I read said this: there is no country, society, or culture where people with mental illness have the same societal value as people without a mental illness. That's very sad. And that really explains some of the really awful things that people felt fine saying about Simone Biles. Just imagine saying some of the same things about a person with a cancer diagnosis. Well, sure, we got to focus on cancer treatment, but we don't get to question it? No, you don't. And Will Cain, you don't get to question anyone's decision to get treatment for anything, physical or mental, because ultimately, it's none of your damn business. Now, maybe if you knew someone that you loved that had mental illness, you might think a little bit more about the words you use. You might be more careful, more compassionate. You might show a little empathy. But here's the thing. 1 in 4 of us will experience a mental illness every year. So that means the odds are, Will Cain, you do know somebody who has experienced mental illness. Perhaps they don't feel safe sharing that with you because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be shamed. They do not want to be subjected to individual criticism.